Welcome to our favorite things. The idea for this session came about because, as you know, our motto here at Candid is we get you the information you need to do good. Of course, Foundation Directory Online and GuideStar are our main tools for that, but we also offer a lot of other data products as well. And I just wanted to introduce everyone to some of those. We have a lot to offer, not just for nonprofits either. Some of these are of interest to anyone who would really be interested in these topics and social issues. So what we're going to talk about today is Issue Lab, our nonprofit startup assessment tool, Foundation Maps, our special issue on racial equity funding, our SDG funders page, and you'll learn what SDG stands for, and also our ebook collection. And these are our speakers today, starting with myself, also Dave, Adia, Laya, Supriya, and Christy, and they'll all introduce themselves. But I'm going to get things started. So I'm going to stop my share here now and start a new one. Just a moment. Okay. My name is Lori Guidry, and I'm the Network Engagement Manager for the Western region, which means that I work with all of our FIN partners in the 13 states in the West. And my favorite thing is Issue Lab. Issue Lab is Candid's collection of, it's actually a repository, not just of Candid research, but research from all over the social sector, from foundations, from nonprofits, from academic institutions. It started back in 2006 and Candid acquired it in 2012. But the goal was to have a central place for all of the research on these various issues. Some of these reports and things have been published before, but a lot of the other ones would normally only live on the institution's website or even on their intranet and not be publicly available. So the great thing about Issue Lab is that all this information is available free. There's no charge, no subscription charge or anything to use Issue Lab. Now you might say, yes, there's tons of free information on the internet, right? But not all of it is quality information. And that's the great thing about Issue Lab is that these are, you know who's publishing it. These are research studies, white papers, data analysis, all different types of report on various issues. So one way that we use Issue Lab a lot at Candid, at least in my area, is when we're doing training, especially proposal writing training. A lot of times in proposal writing, we talk about the needs statement and about defining the problem. And so we encourage proposal writers to look at Issue Lab for information to frame the problem that they're working with so that therefore they can tell funders how they're going to bring about a solution. So I had an occasion to refer to Issue Lab once in one of our proposal writing boot camps. I was teaching the outcomes section, and a man came up to me afterwards and said, I'm really struggling coming up with, outcomes and metrics. His organization provided equine therapy for addicts. In other words, they brought them in for so many hours a week and they would work with horses. It's a way to, engage them in mindfulness and, help, whatever they're dealing with. So he said the outcomes and the metrics for, programs that are related to addiction, he said, are just heartbreaking. I can't say that, we're going to cure their addiction or that after participating in this program, they just miraculously stopped using. So I'm not sure how I can come up with different outcomes. So I had an idea later to check on Issue Lab, and there actually is a section for substance abuse. And this is one way you can explore the areas. So all of the issue areas are listed here. As you see, there's numerous areas to look at. So I went to the substance abuse area, and Issue Lab, the first page will always show you what the funding levels are, but also the most recently published titles. So I clicked on that, and this was just sort of serendipitous, but I started looking for, reports about other programs or about how, he might define his outcomes and, how he could measure what they were doing. And right away, I looked up on this one that talked about women's recovery services in Minnesota. So I looked in this report. When you click on the report there, you can actually download the entire report into a PDF. So that's what I did. You can download it via IssueLab, or you can go to the publisher's page directly. So this is what they do. And, I didn't, go through the whole report, but even after just skimming a few sections, I was able to get some ideas for him. One of the ways that they were measuring things is just by how often the participants in this program showed up for the various activities and sessions. So I told them maybe it's a matter of, do people continue coming to your program? Do they refer other people to your program, or perhaps, I learned in here that they measure things like how they're performing in other aspects of their life. Were they able to at least hold on to their job? Did they reconnect with people? So these were some other metrics he could use, because he couldn't, in all honesty, say that, he was actually, solving people's addiction problems. So that's one way it came up in IssueLab. The other thing I wanted to note about IssueLab, as you can see, it can be a little overwhelming. Hold on, let me get my boxes straight here. Okay. It can be a little overwhelming because there is so much information here, as I said, in the issue areas, but I'm going to show you a few ways to kind of cut down on it. So let's say you were looking into housing and homeless information. Okay. Okay, so this, as you can see here, there are, over 1,000 reports about housing and homelessness. So how do we, make that a little more manageable? As I pointed out, on the first page, they always show you titles recently published, because some of the work in here goes back a much longer way. So one way to do this is that you can also go into search this issue area, and you can limit by publication date. You can look at, just things in the last year, or document type. You can combine issue areas. For example, if I wanted to look at homelessness and the elderly, you could do that, or you could limit by geography or by language. Document type is also useful if you were just looking for maybe just a fact sheet about this or something. You could also limit and do that. So there's a lot there to explore. I encourage you to jump on there. But for all of these reasons and more, that's why IssueLab is one of my favorite things. So now I'm going to stop my share, and I am going to turn this over to Dave.
All right. Thank you, Lori. And hi, I'm Dave Holmes. I am the programs manager for the Midwest office. And I've been here for quite a long time and have used a lot of these resources. So they're all kind of my favorites over time. But this one I'm going to show you, the Nonprofit Startup Assessment Tool, is one that is one of my favorites, not just because I worked on it for a while, but also because it answers that question that you often get, which is, I want to start a nonprofit. I don't know what to do. How am I going to do it? Should I start a nonprofit? Which I think that a lot of people face when they're dealing with the public just walking in the door. So the Nonprofit Startup Assessment Tool was meant to be a gentle way of saying, maybe you don't know everything you think you know, or maybe you're not quite ready to start a nonprofit, or maybe you are. I'm not sure. I can't judge just from my little conversation. I'm going to use this tool. So if you want to find this, by the way, if you go to Candid's main page, which I hope you know where it is, candid.org, and then you go to Candid at a Glance. That's what I always use at the top of the screen, is Candid at a Glance to get to any other section of the Candid website. This is in Candid Learning, along with all of our training programs and a lot of our other resources that you probably use pretty regularly. And when you go in here, you will find in the section under Resources, a section just about nonprofit startup resources. So if I open that up, it's going to show me nonprofit startup resources. And the first thing that comes up on that page is the Nonprofit Startup Assessment Tool. Also on that page, by the way, are resources for each region in the United States. So if you are not using that and not pointing people to some of the legal information and other things that are on there, I encourage you to do so. The Nonprofit Startup Assessment Tool, though, is something that people have to register before they use. And if I haven't already logged in, it will tell me to log in before I get in here. And just basically, it's free. So you just basically ask people to share their email address. The reason why we have people registered for this is that it makes it something they can get back to, and they don't have to do it all at once. It is 75 questions, and the 75 questions are in a lot of different topic areas, from getting started to talking about inspiration and social capital and volunteers and understanding a market analysis. And each of these sections have a few questions, sometimes as few as 4, sometimes as many as 11, to get a sense of where the person who is filling this out might be in their steps that they're going through for the process. So you can start anywhere on this section, or you can start at the very beginning. And by when I say you, I mean any of the patrons that you set up with us. And you can have the person begin to use this. And of course, we have a large disclaimer that you will go through. But after that, you will get a lot more information in here about, and I'm going to put my zip code in here, about what you do. Have you ever started a business or a nonprofit organization? No, for example. There's a lot of very simple questions. Do you have any close friends that have started it? Yes. In what skill areas do you think your funding term will need? These are meant to be trick questions, really. They're meant to be questions that get you to think about the elements of starting a nonprofit. And there's no one right answer to this. But what I will tell you is that as you go through here and you decide that you have filled this out and it's accurate, or you ask the person to fill it out and they get it accurately, it's going to be leaning more towards the things that people need to learn. And a lot of these questions are based on surveys that have been done and research in the field. When this was originally developed back many years ago, it was done in a paper format at our Atlanta office of Foundation Center at the time. And they did work with the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta to put this together. It was a complicated thing to decide what are the right questions to ask and what are the right answers to get from this. And some of the things seem a little bit iffy, like year you're born. I'm not going to tell you the year I'm born. I'm just going to pick a random year, and I'm going to click this selection for. It gives you the opportunity to move on, but it also gives you the opportunity to begin looking at the insights you can get. Now, these insights are really where the main good thing about this resource is, because it tells you, based on the answers that you've given, how well you rank overall. Now, I just did random answers here, and apparently I need significant improvement before I move on. But there are other options you will get, either green, yellow, or red. And each one of these questions will have detailed breakdown and insights related to them. So once you answer a number of questions, you get, what are the answers that you gave? Here are some insights that you need. And here are some resources that you might take advantage of because you do not have maybe all the information that you need for this. It's a nice little resource, and it doesn't require you to decide for the person that's taking it what they need and what they don't need. It gives them targets and it gives them direction. This report, after all the sections are filled out, is compiled into one document that you can download as a PDF. And one of the best things about the resource, and this is something, it's been revised a number of times, and the last time it was revised, it was made possible to go back and edit what you've already answered. So this tells me how many questions I've answered on this. But if I've changed, if I've done some training and I understand more about human capital now, I can go back here and edit my answers and run the entire assessment again and see what ratings it gives me and whether it gives me red, yellow, or green. So I think it's a really nice resource to get people started. It gets people thinking about what they need to know, and it leads to a lot of our other resources that are in our knowledge base or in our training. So if you're not using it, I encourage you to start using it, and hope that you will. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn this over to Adia.
Hi, my name is Adia, and I'm Communications and Outreach Manager here at Candid. Okay, and so one of my favorite things is Candid's racial equity funding resources. So, first I should say that in my opinion, philanthropy's renewed focus on racial equity and racial justice is long overdue. What we are seeing is that since George Floyd's murder, racial equity, which wasn't a prioritized area of funding before, has become a bigger priority. Philanthropy saw that just like collective efforts helped improve other areas in society, they could, and I might even say that they have a responsibility to help. Our most recent data shows unprecedented growth in funding directed to issues related to racial equity. This data includes giving by foundations, corporations, and high net worth individuals. Increasingly gathered, my apologies. Okay, let me try this again. It didn't work, so I'm going to do it this way. Apologies, everyone. There we go. Okay, so these are from high net worth individuals, and so the tools are providing more background details and nuance about philanthropy's response to racial inequity. So for a quick overview of the funding figures, Candid has tracked $61.3 billion in racial equity funding since 2011. This includes $50.1 billion in grants and $11.5 billion in pledges. Oops, I apologize. And we've tracked $26.2 billion in racial equity funding since 2020. This is not my day. Grants include 15 billion in grants and then 11.5 billion in pledges. So as you can see, a lot has been done to advance racial equity funding, but there's still a lot more to do. So how might our racial equity funding tools benefit you and your audience? Some people may inquire, how are people responding to George Floyd's death? Has there really been an uptick like what is being reported? Which companies are donating money? Where are funding gaps? Who in my city is funding racial equity? How can I help? You can point them to two free resources. The first is our Funding for Racial Equity special issue website. It breaks down funding totals, includes news and commentary, issue lab collections, Candid blog posts, and more. Okay, the second resource is Candid's Racial Equity Foundation map. You can get a granular breakdown of funding by state, year, grants, grant makers, recipients, and more. You can access the map via our Funding for Racial Equity website. So for an example, let's say you're a Fin in Chicago and a patron asks you which nonprofits in Chicago are receiving racial equity funding. Okay, so what you can do is you can go to the Foundation Maps Racial Equity page, and if you look near the top left, make sure that the view is recipients, and you're going to go to location, type in Chicago, and then go for the Chicago, Illinois option. And right now you'll see a list of all of the funding in the Chicago area, and you can either zoom in or zoom out. And then if you go to the list, which is on the upper left side, you'll come here and then click on the recipients tab, and then you will see the list of grant recipients in Chicago. And then if you want, you can go back up to the top where it says more filters and filter in even more. So as you and your patrons want to see what has been done to further racial equity, what is being done, and what can be done in the future, Candid's Racial Equity Funding website and map are two of our resources where you can find valuable information on this important issue. And there are many ways you can use the information you find on our Racial Equity Funding website and map to do good. And so that's one of my favorite things. And I'd like to turn it over to Laya now to share her favorite thing.
Dia. And hi, everyone. My name is Laya Greeno. I'm Director of Data Discovery at Candid. And one of my main roles is to try to increase the amount of real-time information that Candid can provide to the sector. And that includes a program that you all might have heard about yesterday, which is where funders share their grants data directly with us. And that's a huge part of us being able to bring real-time information to the field. So if you want to learn more about that, feel free to ping me. So one of my favorite things is foundation maps. And I love foundation maps because I think it's the best way to explore our data. And I'm just going to walk you through a scenario just to illustrate the different types of questions you can answer using this tool. So say I'm a funder interested in the wildfire response in California. So I'm going to go to subject area. I'm just going to type wildfires, since that's the topic I'm interested in. And then since what I want to know about is California, I'm going to add that in the location. Now this throws people off a bit at the beginning, but it's easy once you get the hang of it. But Foundation Maps lets you explore information in 3 different ways based on location. So you can explore information based on the location of the organizations receiving the funding, and that's the default recipient's view. You can explore it by the location of the organizations providing the funding, and that's the funder's view. Or you can explore the grant information by the geographic area meant to benefit from the funding, and that's the area served view. And in this case, since what I'm interested in is any funding going to address wildfires in California, I'm going to stick with this area served view. And what's great is that just with one click, I already get a sense of the distribution of funding on this topic. So going back to the questions I was interested, or that I mentioned that you could answer with Foundation Maps. I'm a funder and I want to know who else is working on responding to the wildfires in California. So for this, I'm just going to pop over to the list view. And right away in this funders tab, I get a list of funders that have providing funding for wildfires. And I'm just going to deselect US federal funders so that I'm just looking at more traditional philanthropy. And if I click on a funder, I get some information about their top recipients, the grants they've made specifically for wildfires, and other background information that Candid has about that organization, as well as contact information. And so this is just a way to explore the landscape of funders for this. The other question I can answer is, who are the organizations actually carrying out the work? So can I use Foundation Maps to identify potential grantees? And so to answer that question, I'm going to stick with this list view, but pop over to the recipients tab. And right away, again, I get a list of recipients. Now, say I'm interested in working with organizations focusing on vulnerable populations, such as immigrants. So I go to more filters, and under population served, I select immigrants and migrants. And now the list has been narrowed down to organizations that have received at least one grant to serve immigrant populations in the context of wildfires. And if I click on the recipient name again, I get some background information about that organization. So who's funded them. So this could be good for due diligence. Get details about the grants they've specifically received for wildfire response serving immigrant populations. And again, some background information and contact information. And what I think is great about this is that maybe some of these organizations were already on my radar, but probably some are new to me. So this is a good way to expand your network. And you can also see here with these gold or silver, this indicates the seal status of the organizations. And I'll just end by noting that this is also a great way for nonprofits to get a sense of the landscape they're operating in. So it's good for nonprofit audiences as well. That's
Laya,
really just.
Can we slip in one question here before we go? I said we were going to wait, but Christina Dooley wanted to know, can you show the search limiters in maps? And then we'll move on to the next one. Yeah.
So you could do location, subject, population, support strategy. So this is things like, am I providing general support? Am I enabling or supporting advocacy or policy efforts? You could do grant ranges, years, transaction types is most of what's in our database is cash grants, but there's also other types of things like program related investments. and then funder type. So you could also narrow down by community foundation, for example, or maybe you want to know what corporations are doing in response to an issue. So yeah, like I said, this is the tip of the iceberg. You could do a lot with foundation maps, and that's why it's my favorite thing.
For the years, though, you know, I noticed it said all the funding from 2006. So if you want to see just the funding in the last 5 years, or like the wildfires, you know, in the last, I don't know, 2 years or 3 years, you have to specifically go in and check all those boxes.
Yeah, you would have to do that.
Okay.
Sometimes you could enter keywords, like maybe you're interested in the response to a particular wildfire. And so this again depends on the quality of the data we've gotten, but if a funder has referenced the actual fire in their grant description, then that could come up via doing a keyword search as well.
Just as a comment from librarians and academic databases, a year limits is like a slide. So we just slide, you know, for when we limit our years. So that's why I was like, what are those, you know, so anyway, thank you.
Well, it's a good suggestion. We'll take that back.
Okay.
Well, now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Supriya.
Awesome. Thanks, Laya. Hi, everyone. My name is Supriya, and I'm a Global Partnerships Research Manager here at Candid. And today I'm happy to be here and share with you one of my favorite things, which is our SDG Funders website. It's a free public resource, and the idea is to see how foundations are engaging and supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. For those who don't know, the Sustainable Development Goals was essentially created by the UN General Assembly, and it's meant to be global goals that, you know, we as a planet are going towards to help decrease poverty, improve educational levels, as well as there are some environmental goals as well. And the main purpose of this site was to see how is private philanthropy playing a role in that, and, you know, who are the grantees on the ground that are working on these issues. And so when you go to sdgfunders.org, you can go to the Who's Funding the SDGs page. And this really gives you a very broad overview of who is funding these very different goals. There are over 17 different goals. On the landing page, this gives you an overview of who's funding all of these goals. And the reason why this page is really cool is because it gives you a sense of, you know, not only how much money has been going, but you actually get a sense to see which goals kind of gets the attention of which funders. So you can see here that in general, education often is at the top and health seems to be at the top. And then you actually get to see, you know, what are some of these goals that are maybe not getting as much attention. So you as a funder can maybe invest in these or see, you know, what's happening in terms of where the money is flowing. As with some of our other websites, we do have a list of our foundations as well as recipients that are involved in this work. And you can also see the distribution by population. So if you are an organization that's working on one specific goal, so for example, maybe you are working on reducing inequalities within gender. Sorry, of course, our site will be extra slow today. You can actually narrow down to see how much money is going towards that specific goal, what that is in terms of percentage for, you know, the entirety of money that's going to all these goals. And what is the overlap of funding? Where are there other, you know, areas that are working together with this specific goal, and how is that money looking? I think what is probably the most interesting in terms of your audience is this can be used as a way for many nonprofits that are perhaps writing some grant proposals. For example, if they're looking to get a funder who maybe is more interested in, you know, the wider impact of the work they're doing, we have this SDG indicator wizard, which lets you see how a certain organization actually matches up to any specific sustainable development goals, if they are. So for example, you can type in keywords here. So if I do something like, you know, providing girls access to health, I can just quickly type that into the wizard. And then it lets me know that, you know, this focus actually falls under 2 different goals. And here are the relevant targets and indicators that the UN Assembly and countries have decided are ways to actually, achieve these goals. And this could be helpful in terms of writing grant proposals where you can actually pinpoint, this specific work that this organization is doing is actually a part of a wider global effort to improve gender equality and improve education. And perhaps that might be helpful in terms of garnering some foundation attention. So that's one really cool way to link your local work to more global goals that are happening across the world. Another thing on this site that's also helpful is our report section. This actually feeds from Issue Lab. So if you're familiar with Issue Lab, you'll get the same reports there, but this sort of filters down to Sustainable Development Goals specifically. And you can use keywords to search for things or actually select an issue or select a goal to find things that you're looking for. So I encourage you all to take a look. It's free and available to all. So just go to sdgfunders.org and you'll be able to access it. And with that, I will stop sharing and I will pass it on to Christy.
Hi, thanks. I'm Christy Roulette and I'm Candid Support Liaison. I provide support to nonprofits as part of our online librarian and Candid support teams. And my favorite thing is our ebook collection. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And I'll try to make it quick because I know we want to have time for questions and time before your next session. Some of you may have tuned in earlier to the Candid Learning session where I highlighted ebooks as one of the key resources found on our Candid Learning website. And I'm hoping you guys don't have too much background noise. I have a neighbor getting their lawn service, so it's a little loud. So I'm going to keep talking through it. Hopefully you can hear me. As I mentioned before, there are two ways to access the collection on the Candid Learning website. Under resources, you can go straight to borrow ebooks. It's going to take you there to our website, candid.overdrive.com. Of course, you can go directly here as well. And this free public collection of ebooks and audiobooks was started in 2018. And I was lucky enough to be on the ground floor of that project and started curating that collection as a way to, at the time, augment what we were doing in our regional libraries, but it became even more powerful as we transitioned to moving away from those physical locations. And even more important, when COVID came around and we wanted to have access to all this great information remotely for so many people, wherever they were. So now the collection has grown to over 400 titles focused on the social sector and philanthropy related topics. You can borrow up to 2 items and place holds on 2 additional items at a time. So each item is available to you for 2 weeks. And you can even renew as long as up to, I think, 3 days before the loan expires, as long as there's no hold. So it's very flexible. If something isn't available, you put a hold, it'll tell you usually like where you are on the list. And as most people are familiar, obviously, that with Overdrive and through public libraries, this can be added on Libby app and Overdrive app as well as just another library. And you can, check out books through the app as well. One of the reasons I find this resource so valuable is it's uniquely focused on the nonprofit sector and subject areas such as starting a nonprofit, fundraising, proposal writing, strategic planning and evaluation. And it also doesn't matter at what stage, of a learner or what part of in your career. There's things that are kind of primers that we have in our collection, as well as, things that are more issue-based or things that are for the more seasoned level executive. So the way that this site works, we've highlighted some of our collections here. You can search, as you're used to probably, just keyword here, putting in either an author, a title, a keyword. But one of the things that we've done, because everything in our collection is centered around the same topic area, is curated these specific collections. So we're adding things all the time, but based on a lot of our topic areas that you find on Candid Learning, corporate giving, individual giving, etc., starting a nonprofit, you can click on any of these to see both books, or if there's an audio book version, we'll always get that as well when we're getting and building the collection. And you can see whether it's available to borrow or if it's on hold. When you either click on the book to borrow itself, or in the top right-hand corner, you'll see here this sign in. You're going to need a user ID. And we are really working to get this all to single sign-on, but at this time, this is still another an ID that you would sign up for once. But once you fill out this form that's on the site, you click on that user ID help, fill that out. It's going to send you an email and then tell you your code. You write that down, you put it in here, and then you can use it anytime. Once you have logged in, you can then go back and check out books and do anything that you need to do. The nice thing, as everybody knows, is the portability of having ebooks and audiobooks, except, from wherever you are. You can access it from any computer, smartphone, tablet, or e-reader. And the audiobooks is something that we added probably maybe 2 or so years ago now. And especially, it's to be able to just either listen to a chapter of what you need, when you need it, and wherever you are. And that's one of the coolest things I think about this. So I talked about how to find the books. If you ever find something that is something you want to recommend that's not in here, you could put in anything. Right now, I'm just going to put in something like, you're going to see some of these titles come up, but let's say, I'll just put in nonprofit titles in general. You're going to see all the things that have anything associated with nonprofits in our collection here. But anytime you're doing a search, you're going to see also things that we don't own. Some of these, we may not own them because they might be a little old. We may have them on our wish list. You can always recommend it to us, and it sends us a request, and we run those reports and put those usually at the top of our list to get them. So as long as it's available in an ebook version, we will definitely, get it added. One of the things I looked at kind of as a fun fact about the collection since we started, of all of the subject areas, I don't know if this would surprise anybody here, but proposal writing was far and above like the category that most titles were borrowed from. But then I looked at the last year because I thought, well, maybe that's a little different. And there's one title actually specifically that had been reviewed and checked out more than anything else was Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. And I wanted to point that out because as you saw on our homepage, we have a very extensive diversity, equity, and inclusion collection on ebooks. And thanks to a generous grant from the Borealis Philanthropy Group, we now have about 75 unique titles in our collection that center on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Cast was a part of that. So there's so much cool things to discover here. I think, I encourage you all to get an account, check out something, even if you're just taking out looking at a chapter, listening to one bit. But those are just some of the reasons why our ebook collection is one of my favorite things. And I wanted to open it back up to the group in case anybody has questions that didn't get answered, Lori, because I know we're at 4:10.
Yeah, we have just a little more time. One thing I did want to point out, and I'm just going to do a quick share, and then we can take however many questions we can. Someone mentioned about how to find these resources. The best thing to do is to start at Candid Learning. That's where you'll find the nonprofit startup and also the borrow ebooks. But in addition, on the tops of all of our pages, there's a Candid at a glance. And if you click on that, then that will give you links to Foundation Maps, which I mentioned is a paid resource, to Issue Lab. And then also Supriya put a link in the chat that will take you to the other specialized pages, like for racial equity and for SDG funders. So yeah, I'll turn it back over to see if there are any questions on anything in particular that you wanted to know more about, but I encourage you to just kind of, surf around, as she said, that so that we could all, so that you can learn. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We only had 5 minutes to talk about each one. So I encourage you to explore more. So are there any other questions so far? And if not, then I would encourage you all to check out the next session with Tracy Waxler. This is always a Network Days favorite, where she will update you on our main information tool, or one of them, Foundation Directory Online. Shelley has a question. Can we request copies of journal articles from the catalog of nonprofit literature? Christy, do you want to field that one? I'm not sure where that comes in still.
So things that we owned through the physical libraries, is that what I'm?
No, there was a catalog of nonprofit literature that had some article links as well as the books at one time. And I'm not sure if that's still active.
So those are different. Yeah, they don't get connected that way. We have talked about adding some of our original book, some of our publications, if we're able to put those in electronic format, but we haven't talked about journal article connections.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, I encourage you to explore, and also remember, these resources are not just for your nonprofit patrons or audience. It's really for anyone who's interested in these broader issues that the social sector deals with. So we got a couple of minutes. I'll give you time to take a quick break before Tracy's section, and I will see you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye.